What's up, everybody? I'm Joey from Tracer. Welcome back to another episode of the Tracer podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have a conversation with Jesse Rich. Jesse just pulled off an amazing win at Run Rabbit Run, a very competitive 100-mile race in Colorado. He has a master's degree in nutrition, and he's been on the podium of many other races. Jesse, congratulations on an amazing race, and thanks so much for joining me for the podcast today.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, Joey. Excited to chat.
Yeah, so we met up at Snowbird. You had been out for a training run before Speed Goat. You were close to the top 10 in Speed Goat as well this year, very competitive 50K. Tracer was up there doing the Cirque Series races. For those of you who don't know, Cirque Series are super fast, short, steep, technical mountain races. And Tracer's a partner of the Cirque Series. We're the exclusive training partner. And so we were up there, and Jesse came in from a training run, and we had a mutual friend up there. And so we got to know each other up at the Cirque Series. And then I got to watch him go dominate at Run Rabbit Run. So I'm super excited to talk to Jesse about everything he did leading into that race, what he did during the race. For those of you who are new here to the podcast, everything that we talk about here is really geared towards things that you can learn and takeaways that you can have by listening to people like Jesse to help you be a faster runner or an endurance athlete. There's a lot of overlap with cycling, a lot of overlap with skiing. Any endurance sport is very relevant here. Our bullseye is trail running. We spend a lot of time talking to trail runners and focusing on that subject. So if you're new here, welcome. Conversations designed to make you faster. Jesse, tell us all about the race. First question, I guess, would be, tell us how you prepared for this race that you just had.
Yeah. Good question. Yeah. I mean, I think an important note to start is it's several years of preparation, right? Like these things take a ton of time. Aerobic development takes many, many years. And so, yeah, I've been racing for like 13 years now, taking it a little more seriously for like 8 or 9. But, yeah, I mean, I pretty much just first starting out, I just did aerobic, nothing else. I just ran easy for a long time. And then the last, 3 or 4 years have actually been much better about self-coaching and being more accountable to myself about workouts. Let's be honest, like they're not fun, they're hard, they're painful. And so I just kind of had to start keeping myself accountable to do those painful workouts a little bit more. And so, yeah, layering on aerobic work with some harder workouts has really helped. There's only so much you can do in aerobic development to where there is, a potential ceiling where to raise that ceiling more faster stimulus is important. You need to get accustomed to your heart rate being a little higher more often if you're going to be pushing. So that's kind of the approach I've taken the last couple of years, is even if it's just once a week, do a hard workout. And this year especially has been really focusing on those ultra long runs. So I had never really done anything over a 30-mile long run before this year. And then this year I've just been like, the week after Speed Goat, I did like a 41-mile long run. And then it was all just like really high 20s, 28, 25. And I didn't do a ton of the back-to-back stuff that I know is helpful. I just couldn't do that with my schedule. If I could have, I probably would have done more of those like 20, 30 back-to-back long runs, but that just didn't fit for me. Usually Fridays I'd have to do like 2 sessions in a day, which, would be 10 in the morning, 10 in the afternoon. So technically I still am getting 20 in the day, just through a double instead of a single push, and then doing something like a 28 to 30 mile long run the next day. So for 100 miles, definitely emphasize the volume. I like to schedule my race calendar where I get progressively longer distances so I can kind of focus You know, I don't have to focus too much on crazy volume starting the year. And I had those workouts going. And then as I'm working towards the 100, I can feel more comfortable getting into the 80, 90, 100 mile week range without stressing the body too much. I don't want to do that for many months of the year. You know, I'm really only hitting 80, 90, 100 mile weeks, maybe 2 months of the entire year, because I think that's where diminishing returns can start happening. So I'm very careful with that kind of volume, and I don't do that much. I'm a relatively low volume overall in in an annual standpoint over a year, probably a bit lower than most, because longevity is important to me and I don't want to burn out. So yeah. And the workouts can range from anything from 30-second strides to, 15-minute tempo repeats to a long run effort where you're trying to go at race pace. So very, very different workouts for different systems, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You said you started running 13 years ago, and over the past few years, you've been taking it more seriously and structuring your workouts a little more. You mentioned something really interesting to me, which is that you just ran easy at first. And 13 years ago, that would have been 2013. That's about when I started running a little bit, maybe a little bit before me. But when I started, it was all about no pain, no gain. Like there was no such thing as easy running for me, and it got me nowhere. And I've told this story many times in various podcasts that I've done or videos that I've put together. How did you know to keep it easy? Was that just something that you preferred doing, or did somebody teach you that?
I was like you. I started out too fast and I got injured. Like that's how I learned. I got some pretty bad injuries starting out that I had to take off 6 months, and I was like, okay, something's going on here. So I had to recalibrate and really understand what easy meant. And then that changed everything. But I made that same mistake, where you just got to push every, you're really obsessed with your mile times and all that. And it's so funny now that some of my easy day miles are slower than ever. But now recovery runs are literally just about, and this is what I try to tell people, recovery runs you should feel better after the run than when you started. That's what a recovery run is. And a lot of people are just taking every run a little bit too hard. If every run is moderate, you're not really going to be able to get high quality workouts in or quality workouts. So I'm a big believer in polarized training, where it's a lot of zone 1 and then some zone 3, depending on the person. We could get into zones if you'd like, but zone 2 is different for a lot of people. Someone who's been training for a long time, zone 2 can be really hard. So taking Olympians, for example, they do polarize where it's zone 1 and zone 3 and almost avoiding zone 2 entirely. So that's an approach that I really like, where you're going to go hard on some days and go really hard and then improve those workouts over time instead of stagnating. And then recovery is serious recovery. So yeah, I made the same mistake. And I finally figured it out and kind of put my ego aside and realized running slow is the way to start things, because yeah, if you get injured too, several months off of training, you're really kind of going backwards. So as long as you can stay healthy, which lucky enough I've had little twinges here and there the last few years, but I haven't been taken out by anything like I used to before, and being a lot older, you'd think I'd be getting injured more, but because of those really slow days being slow and respecting my body, it's helped a lot.
Yeah, there's somebody out there listening to this right now who is training hard every time they go out. They're thinking the harder they suffer, the more they suffer, the faster they suffer, the better their body is getting at running. And that's just not true. And yeah, so how did you learn that though? You just through getting injured, you ran too hard, you got injured, and you decided, okay, if I'm going to be doing this every day, I need to back off. Otherwise, I'm going to have a tweaked knee or pulled muscle or something.
Yeah. I think the only input I had, the only influence really was Sage Canaday back in the day. He had a
cool.
VO2 Max
Tracer
Productions.
Coach, yeah.
Tracer Coach, yeah. he was like probably, I would imagine, one of the first trail runner YouTubers. And
Yes.
so I started getting onto him, and he probably made like, I feel like if you looked at his video library, probably at least 10 videos of the same. And it's good because people need to hear it, but it's just like, this is how easy run should be, you know? And he has so many videos like that. And it's just like pounding that in my head. And, you know, Sage at the time was, you know, winning Speed Goat and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, if this guy's telling me to do that. But yeah, I was pretty bad on like self-educating. I just, cause kind of like pretty prideful about like, oh, I'll figure this out. Like I don't need help from other people and I'll figure it out. But my brother got me into running actually. And he didn't say too much about it. You know, he was kind of getting injured too. We'd go pretty hard together. And then we both kind of like learned the hard way and had a nice little reset. So yeah, just trial and error of probably a couple of years definitely wasted that I could have been more efficient in my training. But
You needed Sage Canada's tracer program.
I did
10 years ago. Where would you be now?
I know, seriously, it's a bummer, but that's, you live and you learn.
Yeah, no, Sage is, Sage is awesome. And he really was one of the first content producers in the sport in trail running, as evidenced by his, you know, what does he have, like 300,000 followers on YouTube, which is a pretty big audience for trail running. So Sage is awesome. And I also have learned a lot from his videos. So, okay. So you know, everything, what you're saying basically leading into Run Rabbit Run, where you just had this win, everything hinges off of this easy running base that because the question was, how'd you get ready for Run Rabbit Run? And here we are talking about what happened 13 years ago. And I think that's a takeaway for a lot of people. Like, Jesse was made over 13 years here. It wasn't like some magic training program that got him to win over the last 6 months, right? Or the last year even. It was based on a foundation of easy running. And probably, I mean, how many days a week would you run over these 13 years leading into Run Rabbit Run?
Yeah, it's definitely varied through the years, but like I've been on a pretty solid 6 days a week for 7-8 months of the year, the last 3 or 4 years. So that's increased. Like it used to just be every other day. But I'd probably say the last 5 years have been like a 6 day a week, most of the year kind of situation. I always take a day off. I love running, but I also love life balance. So I don't do the full 7 days ever. Like I haven't done it once. I always take a day off, and I love that day off. I love running, but that mental and physical reset is pretty nice too.
So what advice, along those notes of the aerobic base building, what advice would you give to somebody listening to this who's still learning how to run ultra marathons or how to be a runner in general? Like what's a succinct way of putting it in your words?
Yeah, I mean, so I also coach as well, and we use a lot of heart rate data. And I'd say like start out with a heart rate monitor. Like, you know, these people that say they figured it out by feel, they probably did, but it takes years to like figure that out on your own. Like a heart rate monitor is really helpful as a tool to expedite the process of knowing where aerobic really is. It's just so subjective in what easy is for people. And so I'd say to kind of, jumpstart the process, check in on your heart rate, do an aerobic drift test, do the Metcart test that we were talking about earlier, like offline. Like there's tests you can do to see where easy really is for you. And then if you can dial in those zones, you're going to be way ahead of other people who are just going off of feel. And like I said, I just barely, literally it's been like this year that I took heart rate training seriously. And I can say like, man, I kind of wish I had that a long time ago, because it's really helpful to know, okay, this is kind of how I feel. Where's my heart rate at? Okay, this is easy. This is this heart rate zone. I'm finally understanding my zones more effectively now. So start with that. It's definitely worth the investment of $70, I think, for a heart rate monitor. Pair it with your watch. Really start to do that. And yeah, like we talked about earlier, don't rush into things. You know, even start with a walk run if you have no running experience. Gradually build. The longer you're not going to get injured, the more durable you become, the more resilient you become. throw some strength training in there, especially if you're over 30 years old. And yeah, just take a gradual long-term perspective at this thing, and it'll pay off over time.
Yeah. And, Coach Scott Johnston has been on a tear this year, and coached both winners of UTMB, Ruth Croft, Tom Evans, and if you're listening to this podcast, go back and listen to my interview with Scott from earlier. I want to say it was about 9 months ago, somewhere in there, where I tell my story of being influenced by Scott. Because when his book came out, I read his book page, it was a page turner to me. Like, I loved it. I just absorbed everything. And I don't naturally have endurance. I'm pretty quick, but I can beat people in sprinting kind of off the couch. Like, that's my off the couch kind of genetic disposition, is I'm quick, but, and I'm powerful, but that doesn't translate to, an ultra marathon at all. And I had to really discipline myself in the same ways that you're talking about. And so if you're listening to this and you're not really following what this means, go back and listen to that aerobic development discussion, that podcast with Scott, because we went over all kinds of, what does it mean to run easy? Why is running easy so important for a bulk of the time? And it sounds like, that's amazing that you're following that same process. So aerobic base was everything. And then you said you started structuring your workouts. You started doing the hard days. And that's been somewhat of a, over the past few years, you've learned to discipline yourself in getting those done at least once a week. How did those go? What were some of the key workouts for you? And tell us about the high intensity. How much high intensity were you doing, and what did it look like?
For sure. And yeah, I don't know if we've made that connection, but I work with Scott at Evoke. So it's cool that he's like a mentor, and he's taught me a lot of these principles too. And Uphill Athlete is the book that I read, and I went to the book signing where Scott and Steve were, and that's how we met in person. You were there for that one?
Yeah, was it in Salt Lake at the Patagonia store?
Yep.
Yeah, I was there.
Where we
so we were in the same room.
That's so cool. Yeah. Awesome. So I was fanboying hard, and then turns out I'm working with him, so I'm super happy to be in that position. But workouts, all same idea. Like, you can't just. I like the idea of just starting really small. In this sense, I really like David Roach's approach, and I think he might push strides a little too much, like overhype them a little bit more than what they actually are for huge long endurance events. But in terms of improving your form and your biomechanics, if you're coming from an easy aerobic base and you're doing 10-minute miles all the time, like, your form is probably not that great, and you haven't recruited much fast twitch muscle fibers. And so strides are a great intro to workouts. So at Evoke, and I know David, again, he does 4x20 with a 1 to 2 minute rest in between. We do something similar, 30-30s, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. So I've played a lot with those, and I do notice that I get more efficient and form feels better over time. If you notice, when you start working out, especially with strides, they're going to feel really sloppy at first. It's a connection between your brain and your muscles. Think of it that way. Like, you're improving the communication between your brain and your muscles. So it's just improving that fast twitch fiber and the circuitry between your brain and your muscles so that they're more reactive. And so if you can run really hard for 30 seconds, it can make those harder efforts and those slower efforts feel easier and more efficient. So the efficiency there is really nice. And then looking at economy workouts where you're improving your oxygen utilization. So that's like looking at tempo, range. I might throw in a little VO2 max stuff. Like the person pushing that the most is going to be Jason Coop. He's really into VO2 max, which is like 3 minutes all out, 3 minute rest. And some would argue that that's just not needed for ultra endurance events. So I'll do all those kind of workouts basically and mix them in. And like I said, I really like doing long run workouts where it's like you need to get comfortable with race pace and get familiar with pacing. Pacing is one of the trickiest things to coach because you have no clue how to guide that person in pacing, because all the variables of their uphill and downhill ability, their flat ability, what's the weather going to be like. So you have to teach them to learn themselves how to pace. It's like, okay, so what is your desired race pace? Let's try it. Let's see how you feel at 4 hours of a 100-mile race where you want to be using that same pace. How does it really feel after 4? Is it a reasonable expectation? So those long runs where you're trying to really practice pacing, I don't think are talked about enough. I think those are really important long runs. So I did a few of those as well. But yeah, those are the kind of workouts. Again, a lot of variety in there, and depending on which race I'm working on, there's more specificity. Run Rabbit Run is mostly running for like the front of the field. You're really not hiking much. So I actually did a pretty good amount of flat running so I can improve my form and economy on flat, whereas Speed Goat was just like a lot of vert focus. So it really depends on which race I'm focusing most on, but that's kind of the gist of things.
Yeah.
And then when I would do these monster long runs, like when I did that 41-mile long run, you got to respect what that's doing to you. You can't really throw in workouts for a week like that. You got to just understand, like, my objective is to take on a huge run like that and absorb it the next week. So you're not like going straight into workouts. So like there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and you got to be careful because you don't want to bite off more than you can chew, but you also want to be really effective in your training. So it takes time to figure that out for sure.
Yeah, during one of my peak weeks over the summer here, I'm getting ready to go into my own 100-miler here at the end of the week. And I did a hard threshold run for about 50 minutes on a Tuesday. And then I did a 34-mile run, Teton Crest, beautiful run up in the Tetons.
That's the same one I did for that mega long run.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hey, we're on the same page. We're at the book signing, and then we're in the Tetons. So
yeah,
we're following the same clues here. That's great. But yeah, I did notice that I was having a strong run until it wasn't, until the last downhill, and then I really struggled on that last downhill, and I've questioned myself on what it was, and it very likely could have been just stacking up, a hard workout on a Tuesday, and then feeling it even on a Saturday, because it's my opinion, maybe we underestimate sometimes the recovery time of even what feels like a normal run, or it doesn't necessarily feel like we're fatigued, but deep down we actually are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what's hard to know. Like, even though you're feeling good, there's still some endocrine stuff probably going on. There's still some musculoskeletal stuff you may not actually feel. But yeah, it's still there. I mean, that's what I tell most people I work with for 100-mile. Like, take a week off. You're not going to lose fitness taking a week off. And even though your body and mind, everything feels good, let the stoke come back. Take a week fully off. Get on a bike if you want. If you have to move, go on a walk. But like, let the physical and mental aspect of things come around. It's 100 miles. Like, we're so used to this now in ultra running. I'm just reminded, having done 100 a week ago, like, this stuff hurts, man. It is harmful to your body. You got to give yourself time to repair if you want to do it long term. If you want to keep doing it, you got to give yourself respect. And the same thing in training. There's this idea of these double threshold runs, which some people can tolerate, but you just got to find this balance between getting the stimulus you want and not overtraining. And I was starting to get hints of overtraining during those really big long runs, and had to just like, okay, my only choice right now is to back off. I overdid it a teeny bit. It's probably the farthest I've gotten into that kind of overtraining realm, which feels really weird. You just are tired all the time. You don't have energy. And I backed off, and I started eating a ton of food and like reduced volume, and you can come back from that really easily if you notice it quick. But if you don't, and you just keep digging yourself deeper and deeper, there's some athletes that are permanently, affected by overtraining syndrome. So you gotta be really careful. Like, this can be a dangerous sport. You've got to be smart about how you train. So,
yeah, there's been so many professionals who have one for maybe a year or two, and then suddenly they're just gone, and they're not racing even. And you wonder what the backstory is with just overtraining. A lot of times somebody goes from kind of an amateur status to winning races, and then they get sponsored, and then they quit their job and they say, oh, okay, now I've got all the time in the world. And then all of a sudden that works for maybe a year, which makes it all the more impressive to watch people like Kellie Jornet, who, or Jim Walmsley, or somebody who's been doing it for like decades at this point, and they're still really hard to beat, and they've been able to have that wisdom in the sport and that longevity. Okay, so going into the race, so you're training, just to sum it up for everybody, a lot of aerobic base, a lot of long runs, and definitely getting in the harder efforts, the threshold efforts, the higher intensity training in various dosages, various flavors, let's say, and taking rest when needed. I heard you say, take a week off if you start to get to the point where you're on the edge of, you're really feeling the fatigue. It's probably time to stop and let it absorb, right? And let that fitness really settle in, let it materialize. So it sounds like your lead in was, based on principles that we've talked many times in this podcast about, and all of our tracer programs kind of follow this same idea, although with different workouts and different application based on the coaches, but they all kind of have the same basis, which is aerobic development combined with some harder running. I know Scott Johnston has been talking quite a bit about muscular endurance lately. In fact, he just got done ripping VO2 max workouts, a new one, because they were just like he did a whole podcast about how he does not train VO2 max, but he did make the admission that a lot of times when you're doing a VO2 max workout, you're actually doing a muscular endurance workout. What are your thoughts around muscular endurance and high intensity?
Yeah, so muscular endurance for the listeners is essentially like localizing damage to the muscles. It is specifically building strength and power in the legs so that you can really push through those like later hours of a race. And so Scott's argument about VO2 max training is you just get too sore before you can really get the good effects and benefits of running that fast. Like, it's just so high intensity that it can be so high risk for injury, and the amount of recovery you need from pushing that hard can sometimes just take too long. So what Scott developed, and this is off of other, I believe, Russian physiologists that he basically based this structure off of, is why don't we use weights or put weight in a pack? That way we can still focus on the strength in the muscles, but not do such fast movement that you get fatigued so quickly and you do so much damage. So by doing weighted box step-ups, some plyometrics, jump squats, split lunges, things like that are going to be really explosive and plyometric. So they do damage. They do make you sore. We do need to prepare people really well for those. But the idea is just you're building that strength. Like strength is so much a limiting factor. Durability is so critical in endurance races that, you got to have some gears at the end of a race. So that's the idea. There's a lot of different ways of doing them, but we do see a lot of success in the weight room, and then also like weighted treadmill. So those are the two modalities. I personally have not been able to fit much of that in on top of the running. I don't have that luxury to add in when I'm kind of in peak training. Like, getting strength training in is just like really hard for me time wise, but I absolutely think that is a pretty critical part if you do have the time to add in that specific strength training so you can have those gears at the end of hundreds. So that's something that yeah, I mean, he worked a ton with Tom and Ruth on those exact things, and it really paid off for them. So I think it's something pretty unique to what we prescribe. And yeah, the VO2 max can just be like, it's a very sharp double-edged sword, where one side might even be sharper, because it's like, it's just such high risk for injury that it could be risky. So yeah, anybody who tries to go just do it yourself, I mean, not under my watch, but on your own free will, go ahead and push as hard as you can for 3 minutes and see how many reps you can actually do. And that's the limiting factor, is you just can't really push each rep as quickly as you'd like. So that's kind of the idea of muscular endurance.
Yeah, if you're a beginner listening to this, what we mean by VO2 max workouts, like Jesse just said, would be running pretty much as hard as you can for anywhere from, I would even say like 1 minute, maybe up to 4 or 5 minutes would probably fit in that category. It's extremely painful. You're almost throwing up. Maybe you are throwing up and you maybe do, I had a workout one time that was like 12 by 90 seconds or something, and really hard. You'll question whether you can even get through the workout. And I think, to Scott's point and to Evoke's point, they, it's, you run this risk of causing so much metabolic fatigue that you do get a muscular workout. Like, I do notice when I do a 90-second interval session, my hips kind of ache a little bit. And it's that similar feeling to when you're doing squats and lunges and that kind of thing. But the danger also could be that when you go that hard, you're actually training your anaerobic system, which is contrary to what we just started this whole conversation, which is base it on aerobic training, right? Like, we need oxygen, and that is the foundation of everything that we do as runners. And if we start doing a lot of VO2 max, we get really good at getting rid of lactate, right? Like, kind of getting it out of there. We get really good at buffering things and kind of dealing with the overload, which makes us great at maybe doing a 800-meter run or something. But that's a totally different metabolism than even a 1 mile or maybe a 10K, which most people, 10K and up is probably what most people would consider endurance. So you run this risk of actually detraining your aerobic system while trying to get the muscular effects. So, So you didn't do much muscular endurance work, but you were probably getting it going into your race by, doing these long days in the mountains. For sure, you're going to get some amount of muscular endurance there. And then the harder workouts to some degree is going to do that. I think that's
so
kind
again,
of
there's
Yeah,
there's a lot of like different ways of looking at it. The way so technically I was doing muscular endurance because these harder long runs, and then also huge piece that a lot of people neglect are downhill workouts. So I would do a couple workouts where I'm like specifically bombing downhill to get that eccentric stimulus that a lot of people neglect. And like, you gotta do that damage to be able to handle those steep downhills. And Run Rabbit Run has a ton of downhill running. So you gotta do it. There's several ways to do it. It doesn't always have to be in a gym, but downhill rep repeats is another one that I think is very much overlooked and effective. But yeah, sorry I interrupted you there. What were you saying?
No, I think along those lines. Well said. So how do you think, on the muscular endurance topic, how do you think nutrition plays into this in a long race, in an ultra marathon, where and when I say nutrition, I'm referring specifically to carbohydrate intake, water intake, salt intake, other, maybe some other electrolytes, whatever the program is. I mean, there's a debate there on what you need and how much, but how much do you feel like your muscles hold up better when you're well fueled versus if you were to go do a fasted run and say, do it the same pace, run the same course profile, same pace, but do it fasted? What's the effect on the muscular endurance there?
Yeah, I mean, I've done some posts on this, and like, you think about the fact that you're burning, especially if you're really pushing 800 calories an hour, right? And your stomach can really only handle like 500 tops in calories, right? So essentially you're going to be in a deficit no matter what. And what a deficit means, this is just thermodynamics. That just means catabolism. That means you don't have energy coming in, so you need to rely on energy within your own system. So you are breaking down calories for your own energy, and the more you do that, the more you're going to have muscle damage. So what carbohydrates do is they preserve you from dipping into muscle tissue for energy. So they allow you to keep your body using a different form of energy rather relying on itself. And you could say, well, yeah, we burn mostly fat. Yeah, we are tapping into fat, but there's also muscle. It's not just some fast where our body's like, okay, there's no intensity here. We're sedentary. We can just burn fat. No problem. We can survive off of fat and burn little muscle. It's much different in an hard exercise environment where you're pushing hard. You're not going to just be using fat. You're going to also be breaking down muscle. So what carbs do is they prevent that breakdown. And I also would like to clarify it's different than protein. Protein is repair, but carbs are preventing the damage in the first place. So those are the two distinguishing factors from those macronutrients. So carb intake that's why there's this huge push, and why people can tend to push harder for longer. Their recovery goes easier. They're preventing some of that breakdown that happens in those long distance events. So again, you're not going to replace 100% of what you're burning, but if we can get you pretty close, there's likely going to be a better outcome, and you're going to feel better for longer. And of course, there's those challenges of GI issues that a lot of people have, finding that right balance for the exact individual that we have to hone in on. But a lot of the times that's a huge predictor of performance and how you can intake fuel consistently throughout the day.
I want to take a quick moment and tell you about a product that I think will help you nail your next marathon or ultra marathon. To do well in these events, you have to train correctly. You have to know how to build your endurance, how to build your strength, how to build your speed, your economy. And it's not always obvious how to do that. So what better way to train than to receive daily workout recommendations from people who are winning these races? These are the pros that have been there and done that and have dedicated their lives to understanding how to make the most of your training. That's what Tracer is. Tracer is a new system that brings adaptive, personalized workout recommendations to you through a mobile and web app on a daily basis for a fraction of the cost of traditional one-on-one coaching. So check that out. You can see more. You can learn more about how that works at tracerfitness.com. There's a free 14-day trial, so there's really no risk. You can go in there and play around with the system and decide if it's for you. I personally have used Tracer for preparing for a 50-miler last year, my first 100-miler this last fall, and recently a ski mountaineering race. And in all three of those events, I exceeded the goals that I had for myself and did extremely well. So check it out, tracerfitness.com. I would say you held together pretty well on Run Rabbit Run this year. You crushed. I was watching the splits. You were not leading the race when you start. Well, you were near the front in the first little bit, but it was kind of fluctuating. And then I think you were in fourth place or something. And then at about mile 50, you were ahead. And then that lead just kept increasing. Every time you'd hit a checkpoint, you had another 10 minutes on second place. And by the end of the race, you were well over an hour ahead of second place, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was pretty wild. And I definitely was falling apart the last 2 hours for sure. I think that's inevitable, especially when you're pushing hard. But yeah, I think that doing my own testing, knowing how much water I needed, how much sodium per hour, and how much carbs were realistic for me, it would have been nice There were some hours I did 90 to 100 grams, but then other hours I was doing 50 to 60. And that's another important thing for people to understand is usually if you're working with a nutritionist who has ultra running experience, we're usually talking about averages. It's going to vary what you intake depending on where you are in the race. You know, if we want to get hyper specific, a long downhill, you're not going to need to be popping 100 grams of carbs because your heart rate is really low. You're just not burning as many calories with that output. So your carbohydrate intake can be lower during those times. It's kind of nice when you do that because then you can kind of get a reset. You're able to then eat a bit more the next hour. So we get pretty hyper specific about like when to ingest those higher amounts and when it's okay to maybe say, all right, I'm going to give a little break to the stomach for this period of time, going to reset, and then go from there. So again, it's an average. I think I averaged right around 80 grams of carbs per hour average, but there were some 100 gram hours and some, 50 gram hours, depending on where I was. So
Yeah, that's fascinating because, I've always made the assumption that you should just set your target per hour and then stick to a protocol. Like I'm doing 80 per hour, 90 per hour, whatever it is. And then look at your watch, and in 30 minutes, you better have half of that down. And in 60 minutes, the whole, if it's in a bottle or something, that bottle better be gone by the end of the 60 minutes or however you're breaking it up. And I know Tom Evans on UTMB referred to this kind of like, let's call it adaptive calorie intake, adaptive carb intake. But if you're running a downhill, shouldn't you just put carbs in your body so that they get absorbed and they're ready to go for when you do hit the next uphill? Or in your mind, is it better to time it so that it's hitting your bloodstream right as you're needing like, do you want it to absorb? I guess that could backfire if you're not using it and you're putting it in. What are your thoughts around that?
that's a great question. Yeah. I mean, so a couple of things come to mind depending on how behind you are. This is where there's so many nuances. If you're already behind, then yeah, take advantage on that downhill. You're going to be making up some major deficits you may have had on the last climb or whatever. It can take some time for the glucose to get to your muscles and liver for glycogen. And so, it could take 30 minutes. So like if you're like coming up on another uphill, well, if you want that, gel to really hit, it's going to be from that immediate burst of energy that you get when it hits your bloodstream to those 30 minutes are kind of the prime time for that gel to like really give you that energy. And so, yeah, if you know that an uphill is coming and you've got another 30 minutes of descending, prep yourself for that. But like Run Rabbit Run is literally a 15-mile descent. So I'm like, I can't just be, I don't want my stomach to flip on me here, but it's also really hard too because a lot of people, it depends on the person. Some people with the jostling, they can't ingest as well the carbohydrates during the downhill. But then the other people are, hey, my heart rate's lower, the less intensity, it's much easier for me to digest. Mm-hmm. So it's really dependent on the person. But yeah, like you need to fuel the effort is kind of how I like to say it. So like if you're 100 beats per minute heart rate, you're cruising down a downhill just really easy. You may not be oxidizing all those carbs, causing kind of a backup, and then you get sick. So just be really careful with it, experiment with it. Some people can maybe handle that 100 grams throughout the whole day, no matter the uphill or descending. But I mean, temperature, time of day, all those things really factor into like how much you should be trying to ingest.
Yeah.
So great question.
Yeah. So you averaged 80 grams per hour. You fluctuated between 50 and 100, maybe, depending on your strategy and the race profile and where you were. What about your salt and water? Tell us about what that looked like.
Yeah, it was pretty good with liter per hour. That's my sweat rate.
Wow. So on Run Rabbit Run, you were a liter per hour throughout the race.
I was drinking a lot.
And I want to point out here to people listening, it was a freezing cold year. Mm-hmm. This was not a Western States year on Run Rabbit Run. It was like people were dropping, like Matt Daniels was out because he like was so hypothermic, right? And people who just it was cold the whole time. Am I right?
It was cold the whole time. Yeah, it was never warm. But luckily, the night wasn't as bad as last year, actually. So it didn't drop. I think it was like high 30s. It wasn't terrible.
Okay.
But yeah, again, average. So I averaged the liter, but as the night went on, not even because I wasn't thirsty, your stomach just gets over anything, right?
Yeah.
And so I started slowing down on the fluids as well. The sodium was, so my sodium concentration is 1,500 milligrams per liter,
Okay.
which is pretty high. I didn't worry too much about getting up to 1,500. I was shooting for 1,000 as a minimum because from the research, you don't really need that 100%. And I actually noticed when I did pee in the night that I think I was going too high at some point. We were talking a little offline how I was using pills. I had pills and tailwind, so I think some hours I was actually going a little over what I needed because it's so easy to just like pop a couple, take some tailwind, and you never know. I actually was having to rely a bit on the course tailwind, so I don't know how concentrated that was. And sometimes I'd ask for just water, and someone would accidentally put tailwind, so I would. It gets really confusing because you're already so tired, and then you're trying to keep track of all your salt and water and carbs, and like eventually you're just kind of like throwing in whatever kind of thing. Like as much as I'm trying to keep people organized on a run, myself as their nutritionist, I start to break apart too at the end, and I'm just like, man, where am I at again? Like on all these numbers. So I need to set a timer on my watch. I have to, like, beeping me every hour because even time just becomes weird. And so I think I actually overdid the salt a little bit, like super amber pee, and I was just like, oh, okay, time to just get some water in, dial back the salt a little bit. So I think I may have actually overdone it a little bit for the conditions, but everything else just kind of sat pretty well. I threw up once kind of early on, and that was just because I was like, that wasn't even the only mistake there was like I just took in too much volume at an aid station. I grabbed a pickle, I grabbed some watermelon, some ginger ale. I just stuffed in too much too quickly, and within 20 minutes, like it was one of those really nice like reset throw ups. Like my stomach wasn't ruined the rest of the day. And then just one pit stop at like mile 85, and that was it. So everything really held up pretty well in the stomach. Surprisingly though, the day after and the day after that, things were just a little bit imbalanced in the gut. Sure. I hadn't had that happen like that for a while. Usually like within a few hours my stomach's back, but this time around, unfortunately, it took a little longer for me to hold food down as well as I'd like. So I think that was just because of the effort itself. Like I just was like really drained and exhausted. So unfortunately, the biggest thing is just getting calories in after you're finished. And I just couldn't really eat anything for even like the first 2 days. So that kind of set me back a little bit. But that's the game you play with these races sometimes, so. Yeah.
Well, the thing that stands out to me is the fact that you were putting down a liter of fluid per hour in 30 to 40 degree weather. Most of the people on Western states who are in the top 20 probably weren't even doing that, probably weren't able to hold a liter down over the course of even Western states, which is a faster race and hotter. And, there's the irony that the hotter it gets, it might actually be even harder to get the water in.
Yeah.
But I think maybe there's an anecdote here from you, which is even when it's cold, you're still sweating and you still need the fluid.
Yeah, that's a misconception that just because it's cooler, it's less. Don't get me wrong, it's less. But you still need those fluids. Like just because you're not seeing the sweat on your body, you're still breathing, you're still losing moisture that way, you're still losing your hydration that way. You're still losing a good amount of water. And that's why these devices like the H-Drop that I have people use are really important. You can test, hot temperatures and cooler temperatures to better understand the fluctuations that are there. But like, you'd be pretty surprised to see that, like, of course, super blazing hot and a cool fall evening is going to be drastically different, but like not by as much as you might think. You're still losing a decent amount of water, even in cool temps.
Yeah. Fascinating. Okay. So I know we've had this conversation, but, we've had a little bit of the conversation, but, I've brought up with you some skepticism that I have around using sodium citrate as a replacement for sodium chloride, or AKA regular salt, right? And so a lot of these nutrition products are publishing sodium citrate as uh, a superior source of sodium for hydration. And the concern that I brought up with you, and I'm still doing my research on this, but I'm I'm concerned about leaving the chloride out because chloride is a negatively charged ion and sodium is a positively charged ion, and the two work hand in hand along with the other electrolytes to basically fire your muscles, right? Like that creates an electrical potential, also known as a battery, that's charged. And then when your brain signals the muscle to fire, that current, that electrical current actually rushes through the cell wall from positive to negative, negative to positive, doesn't matter how you look at it. But that energy from that difference in electricity is just like a car, just like a Tesla, just like an electric car. It creates the mechanical forces through the electromagnetics. And that's how our cells actually fire. And so a lot of these sports companies are putting more sodium citrate in their products at the expense of putting sodium chloride in. And I think because it tastes better and so it sells better. What's BS check me on that and tell me your thoughts, and how that may have played into your fueling or not.
Yeah, no, this was a fun conversation we had, and I definitely went into a rabbit hole looking at the research, and I still haven't found anything yet of seeing when chloride specifically is depleted, because it is an important, chloride is its own electrolyte. And so how important is it, and how quickly does it get depleted in relation to sodium? We know that sodium is by far ahead of all the other electrolytes in the amount that's lost in sweat. But where does chloride line up in comparison to sodium? And I really don't know. I think it's definitely smaller, even maybe behind magnesium and potassium. But I think you have a point. It still is an electrolyte, and we can become depleted of chloride. I think the taste is a huge factor, and I actually did salt pills during this race, and I think that was really helpful, and those were mostly sodium chloride. I think a combination of both is probably good, because citrate also has its own benefits, and the dampered taste is a big one. So I think that if you're doing like an effervescent tab, it makes sense. I don't know if you've tried Element. I've tried it one time. I think it's pure sodium chloride with no citrate with other electrolytes. I can't handle it, man. I can't. So like the taste of the table salt on the tongue of a lot of people, I think, is problematic. But yeah, that was the first time I did salt pills, and I did feel good until the end. So like maybe chloride is an important electrolyte that's getting dismissed and needs to be looked at as, important. And, so what if you have to do pills to avoid the taste, if that does help you in the long term? So yeah, it would be really cool to see a study. Of course, I think of these studies that would be ideal, that I would love to see, but I'm sure very hard to test for. But like what happens after 10 hours, how depleted is chloride in comparison to those other electrolytes, and is it critical to continue to supplement that chloride? Because there's even the argument of, is sodium the only electrolyte needed? Like there was the post from Mike McKnight when he did, I think it was Cocodona, he just relied on pills, and he said he forgot his potassium pills and was just doing salt. and he became super bloated and like puffy, and because the water regulation within the cells was off because his potassium was not being replaced. So at what point is just salt not enough? There are products that only do sodium, right? Like Never Second. Like I went to their booth, they told me specifically we don't need other electrolytes. And so that's spiked my interest of, is sodium really just, is it enough? Like for a 200 mile, I'm starting to question that because of what happened to Michael McKnight. But yeah, this is all just speculation, and I wish I had a better answer. But I think a combination of both is probably the safe place to be.
Yeah, and I want to, we'll move on from this question because there's still more research to do, and I don't want to present too much information that we're unsure about. But my research had shown that you lose as many molecules of chloride as you do sodium,
Okay.
because
Wow.
you're sweating salt. You're not sweating sodium. Like when you get caked white stuff on your vest after that, if you were to taste that, that's salt. And
There's equal parts chloride
yeah,
to
equal
sodium.
parts
Oh,
chloride
wow.
to sodium, like give or take, right? Like a little bit of variance there. But and so if that's the case, and we need to kind of BS check ourselves, and maybe what we need to do is go do some really good research on this, and then we can do another episode, or we'll put together a video or something, and maybe present and even challenge the industry. Like, what are we missing here? And I actually reached out to Precision on this very issue, and cool enough, they responded to me, and they said, no, you're absolutely right. You need chloride. And I said, well, then why don't your products have any chloride in it? And they said, they do. And here's a case study of one of our athletes who really was struggling until he added more chloride into his mix and then started doing really well. And I said, well, and I went and looked online, and it didn't show any sodium chloride. Well, the feed had screwed up their nutrition facts and not
Oh, that's right.
included
Yeah, we had talked
sodium
about that. Yeah.
chloride, even though sodium chloride was actually more than the sodium citrate in that product. And so I was looking at Precision saying, like, what are you guys doing? There's no sodium chloride here. And sure enough, there was. The information I was getting was messed up by the feed. So always do your research. If you're listening to this, I know we're way down in the depths of nutrition here, but it's important. If you're going to run 100-mile races or really long ultra marathons, these details do matter. And
They matter for
and
sure.
a 100-miler will expose anything that you have wrong, right? If you don't feel right, there's a reason you don't feel right, and it could be because there was too much sodium citrate and not enough sodium chloride, and you're sweating out the chloride. So yeah, my current position on it is chloride is absolutely essential to supplement as much as the sodium. But once again, yeah, let's really fact check that and find it out. But I challenge anybody who's listening to this who knows anything. I would love to hear it. So write us info@tracerfitness.com, put it in the comments here, whatever, get a hold of us. And if anybody works at Precision or Scratch, or where, Scratch has a whole website around why sodium citrate's better than sodium chloride, and it makes my my bald head go even balder, because it's like, it drives me nuts because I think it's misinformation. But still working that one through. Interesting to hear that you did the sodium chloride pills and had a good race. It's an anecdote. It's not data. It's not hard set, but that's an interesting anecdote.
I'm gonna stick with them. Seriously, I think there's something to it, and it's just easier in a lot of ways. It is annoying to have to get out the baggie, but like, just pop two and I'm done for the hour. So it's pretty nice.
Yeah. Have you ever noticed a problem with the digestion of the pills themselves? Because some people complain that when you take a salt pill, and we're talking about like a product like salt stick caps or something similar to that. Have you ever noticed anything around the like gelatin of the pill being a problem in your stomach? Because I've heard some people say like chewing them and kind of cracking them in your teeth before swallowing can help them digest faster. Did you ever have any issues, or have you heard of any of your clients complaining about that?
Definitely have heard of issues. I don't know if it's about the casing itself. I think it's just like it's a big kind of bolus of salt at once. That's my thing, and that's what I was worried about because I had forgotten my other salt supplement, and so I had to go with the pills, and I was really worried digestion would be an issue. But I think as long as you can equal out that with enough water to dilute it, it should be okay. But I would imagine that for some people, if you just take a little sip of water and a huge salt pill, it can probably mess up the osmolarity in the stomach and like cause some issues. So I can see why sipping, and that's been my philosophy, is just sipping on the salt. Little drips of salt intake the whole time is probably less risky. But again, I had to experiment by force this time, and turned out it was fine for me. But I could see how if you're not drinking enough water, that could be really problematic. That's what I love about liquid calories in general, with salt in them too, is it's like everything's measured out. As long as the measurement's right, everything, you just drink the water, you're safe. Whereas like the salt pill, I think could easily turn on you if you're not smart about the water intake to dilute a little bit.
Interesting. Okay, so let's talk about the race itself. I mean, we've talked a lot about training and a little bit about the race here. We're learning what you did, but just walk us through some of the experience of the race from your, what were you perceiving, and how I do recall you said something like the first 20-25 miles were, you were in your own head a little bit. But before I put words in your mouth, just maybe walk us through the race. Like, how'd it go, and what was on your mind as all of this unfolded?
Yeah, so this is my third time back there, and right from the start, it's a 1 p.m. start. Within an hour, we're getting some clouds and some drizzle, and I had already left my windbreaker with my crew at mile 17 to take with me. Like, really starting out looked okay, but then really quickly some clouds started coming in. And that's when I think everybody was like, the forecast said like 80% chance of rain. So I think everyone was like, here we go. And so I'm like, man, I need to hold out until I get to Fish Creek mile 17. And so luckily there was some sprinkles, some wind kind of went away, and then I was good until Fish Creek. Just feeling good, man. I don't know. The fitness was just so much better this year. So yeah, I was in fourth, kind of made a move right before Fish Creek, a mile to go to get to the aid station first, get a little more time there. Grabbed a backpack, just switched out a backpack, got a new one. I love that technique. If you're trying to go faster and efficient, 2 packs. Have your crew with another pack already filled with everything you need in it. You just switch packs and go. So started out of Fish Creek, fell back a little bit, ended up like hanging out in fourth. We were all running together for a while there. And then within another hour and a half, things started going real sideways in terms of weather. Hailstorm, wind. I had my windbreaker. My full-on rain jacket was at the next spot I'd see my crew, which was mile 50.
Wow.
But I had gloves and a windbreaker, and I'm like, this hopefully holds me over. And so, it wasn't long before I'm throwing stuff on, and like I'm looking around, we're still with a group of people, and people are waiting. They're not putting their clothes on, the rain gear. And it bit them in the butt. A lot of people had to drop that next aid station because they weren't prepared for the rain. And I think that's when it was actually kind of helpful to have a little more meat on me. Like I'm not big, but like I've got a little more on me than like really skinny runners, So I think that came in handy, and the windbreaker was enough. If it had been storming another 30 minutes, I probably would have been in a bad spot, So luckily the storm passed, dried out, and yeah, that aid station where the storm was still hitting, I got in fourth place, and I leave, and they're like, you're in the lead. There's people hanging out at this aid station, like warming up. And that was mile 42. And so I was like, okay, Bike started following me. He had a live
Yeah.
camera on me. I'm like, this is weird. Holy cow. Like, I need to take advantage of this lead. And that's when I was like, I never thought I'd be in this position at this race. Funny enough, last year I had first for a little bit, but like blew up pretty bad. I also was a little sick, but definitely, went out too hard. So this time I'm like, don't make the same mistake. You're in the lead now. Like, just be calm, collected, and patient with this. Like, push where you can, but also be smart. And then, I just like from there, I think psychologically I'm way better when I'm chased. It just works better for me knowing someone's behind me. When I'm the one hunting, I have a harder time staying positive. I'm just like, oh, he's probably making up time. I'm probably falling behind. But when I'm being chased, it's just a switch. And I just kind of got in that flow state. And I was, really consistent on nutrition, making sure everything's going down fine. Had some purees to mix in, just like kind of baby food basically, to just kind of change up the palate. And then, I was so nervous about losing my position, I didn't even change once. Like, I wet shoes and socks and my windbreaker with just a t-shirt underneath. Luckily, it was not cold enough that I can continue on that way. Mm-hmm. So, I put on these glasses. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's coronal edema. You get edema in your eyes at altitude. And something about Run Rabbit Run and Steamboat Springs is this perfect recipe for this issue to happen. So every year, some people are going temporarily blind. It causes people to go temporarily blind. Last year, I noticed it starting to set in at mile 50. This year was the same thing. It's so annoying. I bought photochromic glasses specifically for this event so that I could have clear glasses at night. I don't know if it was the clouds making them all weird or the other lights, but they stayed dark. They never went clear. Luckily, my brother, though, had some clear glasses for me. And I was like, it's starting to happen at 50. I'm seeing like halos around lights, rainbows around lights for some reason. Blurry vision was starting to take place. And I'm like, if I lose because of this, I'm going to be devastated. And so we tried eye drops and we kept the glasses going on for protection. And as long as I wasn't looking too close at lights, I was good. I was able to get through it. It never fully went away, but it also didn't really get worse. So thank goodness for that. But I just kept hearing that the lead was increasing, and that just gave me momentum. And Brian Kumo, a local guy, was like helping out the guy that was in third, and he's like, he's a good closer though, man. You never know. Like, and I needed that because he's just like, you don't know, he could come up on you. Even though I had like a 20-minute lead, 30-minute lead, you never can be complacent. And the drop from prize money from first, which is 20,000. Second is 8,500. Mm-hmm. So you take a pretty big hit there too.
$12,000. Yeah.
Like 11.5 hit, and I'm just like, that's a big hit to take, man. Like, I want to keep this. Exactly.
One day you just lost 12 grand.
Yeah, that's right. And so I'm just kind of like, all right, well, I got to hold on to this. That would suck to lose that much. And of course, the money was an incentive, but also just the feeling of being in first was amazing. And so I just kept the momentum, kept the positivity. It's such a mental game. And then, with like 12 miles to go at Long Lake, I think it was, aid station, they're like, you've got 51 minutes on it. And I was just like, whew, all right, I got this. Nice. As long as I don't sprain an ankle on my downhill here, I'm okay. And then continue to make up a little more time there where it was a strong finish. But just a wild thing to get in that state and just kind of be able to stay in it. I never imagined I'd be able to, I took 3 hours off my time from when I placed 7th a few years ago, and it's just hard to understand that, and I'm super happy, and I probably was the biggest wild card there. They have this. You can also make money by guessing the top 5, I think, winners. Mm-hmm. And I doubt anyone chose me to win, which is cool. Like, I like being the black horse, whatever it is. So, it was crazy. And then I should say I actually did I finished everything. My brothers were out there crewing me, coming down to the sunrise into Steamboat Springs, just ideal, just amazing. But yeah, I sat down, started shivering pretty quick, had a sip of water, and then within 10 seconds I got back up and had to throw up again. So it had been all day. It had been a long time since I had thrown up, but I think just the intensity of it and just kind of finally stopping and my body like finally just starting to relax.
Yeah.
There was still like some shock going on in my body, just a couple sips of water, and sure enough, just in front of everybody, just had to hurl one last time. And but yeah, man, it was worth going into the depths of a pain cave for that one.
Yeah, amazing. I watched a lot of it. I watched your splits, and knowing you, I'm a Salt Lake guy as well. Salt Lake has been dominating the scene lately, and I love it. And I was cheering for you big time. It was just so exciting to watch you go from fourth place or whatever you were in that initial climb into that next aid station, and then you just put the clamps down on that last 50 miles. It was amazing. Did you have like a target metabolic zone? Were you saying to yourself, like, I'm going to go out at the top of my aerobic zone and I'm going to stay aerobic and I'm not going over it? Or did you go by feel? What was kind of your perspective on the pacing?
Yeah, so funny enough, here I am like advocating heart rate zones, and I definitely think they're helpful. But when it comes to a race, I just think there's too many variables for it to be as accurate as I would want. So and not only that, the chafing is really annoying with those arm heart rate monitors. I knew I would just like scratch up my arm really bad. So I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to go off a feel. I think I've been doing this long enough. I have been working the heart rate. I now can correlate the feel with the heart rate. Sure. So I know more realistically where I'm actually at. But I would say that was probably, I don't think there was much zone 2 or zone 3 at all. I think it was primarily like a zone 2 effort, which is great. There were very few times where I felt like I burned some matches other than that surge to get first in the first place. That probably wasn't the smartest move there, but overall, like, I don't feel like I ever kind of overdid it or overexerted. I just kind of like found a groove and stuck with it. So honestly, I'll probably just not use heart rate in races going forward, just because it's like it can get in your head. The adrenaline is causing your heart rate to be higher.
Oh yeah.
There's just too many variables where I was just like, I don't want to get in my head too much about this. So
yeah, all you got to do is look at your heart rate when the race is about to start, when you're 1 minute away from the gun. You look down. I mean, my zones are like, I can run up to 160 and still be aerobic. And then I start going into my kind of mixed zone after 160. And then my lactate threshold is probably like 177. And I have an abnormally high max for my age. I'm 45 years old. I can get my heart rate up to 190 plus. And so, but at the starting of the race, I look down and my heart rate's already at 120, 130 because I'm just anticipating so much. And so, am I really in the metabolic zone? It's probably just all of the adrenaline just surging, realizing that my journey is about to start. So I kind of agree with that perspective. And find it interesting. So is your recommendation to all of us out here who are doing our best on these ultra marathons, would you say how would you say to go by feel? Would you say, how do you find that kind of sweet spot for everybody? What does that feel like to you?
Yeah,
what
I
advice
think again,
would you give?
Yeah, correlating it with your heart rate zones so you have an idea of what your feel really is, and know where that is in what zone. What I discovered when I started down the heart rate journey is like I'm the opposite. Like, I can't get my heart rate. If you put a gun to my head, I couldn't get my heart rate over 170. Like, it's impossible, which is weird. And it makes me think, this is a different rabbit hole, but does that just mean I'm more genetically like prone to being an endurance athlete and I need to work harder to get my anaerobic system revved up, and maybe those workouts in the past few years have been proof of that I need to raise my ceiling more. And you were saying that you're a pretty good sprinter, so maybe you're more genetically predisposed to being good at like more anaerobic stuff, where like can you correlate someone's low heart rate to their specific strengths? That's what I don't know, but I'm very interested in that. But so I'm kind of hypothesizing, but I think I need to get my heart rate up more often because my system's just not used to high heart rate. But yeah, like everybody's so different. 140 can be way different for me than it is for you. And so understanding where you're at, don't go off of a Maffletone equation. Don't just assume that this is your top of zone 2. Get tested. Make sure you're right about that. And then, yeah, I mean, I don't think it hurts to have some workouts where you're doing perceived exertion, where you don't look at your watch. I do this with some people sometimes. They don't look at their watch, and then they can go off of perceived exertion and then compare after of like, oh, okay, so I'm actually pretty spot on. When he said zone 3 and I wanted to get into zone 3, my perceived exertion is pretty dang close. So you can do it blind sometimes and just see how close they match, but like purely off of feel, I don't think – if you're really trying to get better and better, I don't think that's the way to go. Like match it up with heart rate zones when you can.
Mm-hmm. And how would you say that your target for like what you did? Most people are not going to run a 17-hour run rabbit run, right? Most people listening to this are not in that category. They're probably in the 25 to 35 hour range, right? So for everyday people out there who are not professionals, not on the podium, what counsel would you give them to pace the race and to actually nail it in terms of how they feel? Like, should they be feeling like, did you feel like it was really easy for that first, 30 miles, or do you feel like you're kind of trying to get everything you can out of your aerobic system without going over? How close are you to aerobic threshold, I think, is really what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I don't think that close. I honestly felt like that was pretty controlled, consistent. Again, like everybody, I think at the front has these moments where it's like, I went a little too hot for that little bit of time. There's going to be moments you don't feel 100% like good, but those moments were few and far between for this race for me, which was super exciting. Like, mm-hmm. I started pushing the pace because I'm like, man, hundreds, I usually feel way more miserable like at this point. So maybe I need to push harder because I don't feel miserable yet. But it's
and
just
yet that was your strongest finish ever, right? So
yeah, that's what was, yeah. So I think fitness obviously is going to do wonders and really getting in shape and prepared is going to be helpful. But for someone going out and just doing like a 25-hour day, like depending on, again, some people can dip into zone 3 for way longer periods of time and be okay. So it's really hard to say for a person. Like I'll usually say stay in zone 2 if it's a kind of a amateur kind of mid-pack person. Like just try to stay solid in zone 2 as much as you can. Some minutes in zone 3 are probably fine, but for the most part, try to keep it fully aerobic. I mean, this is 100 miles. You can't, again, there's only so many matches to burn in a 100-mile race. You can't go anaerobic for too long. It would be interesting to see the data of something like Western States where it's more like 14 hours. Maybe you can go anaerobic for a bit more in a race like that, and I'm assuming they are, than even Run Rabbit Run, and then even UTMB, I bet the pros aren't even going any zone 3. They're probably just like having to keep it super mellow. So the longer you're out there, the lower the heart rate has to be realistically. So it really just depends how long you're out there.
I have 2 follow-up questions to that. Would you ever worry about your muscular endurance regardless of the zone? So let's say that you're running, let's say that you can stay totally aerobic, but you're a pro. And running at the top of your aerobic zone is pretty fast running. Would you ever hold back to say that's too much of a beat down on my muscles? So I'm actually going to preserve muscles regardless of how aerobic I'm being.
Yeah, I think for a lot of top level people, top of zone 2 is too fast for their muscles.
Okay.
So I think it's yeah, you're gonna be the cardiovascular system can be so strong where the muscles are usually the limiting factor. I'd say that's a lot of the time the case for 100 miles.
Especially
It's
on a
usually,
downhill, right?
especially on a lot of downhill course, it's going to be the muscle fatigue before anything else. Like
Yeah.
cardio system in zone 2 should be fine for most high level runners, but it's the muscles that take a beating. So
Yeah. Yep.
you really got to have that muscular endurance.
Yeah. Yeah. Second question I have for you following up on that. You ran Run Rabbit Run 3 years ago and you did it in 20 hours. You ran it this year and you did it in 17. Uh, how much of that was the nutrition and the hydration?
Oh man, that's a good question. I would say a huge piece. I would say a huge piece. The fitness was definitely way better. That there's no question about that. But honing in on my nutrition and realizing just working in this field, man, you just realize like how much someone needs to take care of themselves. You know, it's a constant thought of, have I had a drink? Have I had my sodium? Have I had carbs? Like it has to be in your head all the time. Like, am I on top of things? You can neglect it so fast. You can neglect it for 1 hour and your day can be over. Like, it was such a big focus of mine to stay on top of it the whole time. And like, it is just such a big piece of performance, man. It's just another testament to me of like, dang, this is what a lot of people are missing. And I'm really happy to be in the field and helping people with their nutrition. There's not a lot of ultra running specific nutritionists out there, so it's really fun. And there's still a lot of unknowns in this field, but for what we do know, man, people need to drink way more than they think. They need to eat way more than they think. And once they realize that and know this is what it takes to take care of myself and feel good for this amount of time, their potential is so much, they're tapping into that potential like they never have before. So yeah, I'm a huge advocate of like nutrition is just as important as the training. If your nutrition doesn't go well on race day, what's the point of training so hard? You have to have both dialed for the race.
Yeah. 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 That's amazing. And so cool to see, to go from 20 hours, which is an incredible time, right? That's a top 10 time, and yet still take 3 hours off of it. That is so huge. And amazing to an amazing kind of piece of evidence of how well you're doing things even from 3 years ago, right? And the changes that you've made, which I'm going to summarize for everybody. The changes I heard you say you've made over the last 3 years would be, number one, you've learned how to structure your training correctly. You've learned how to apply the right intensity distribution and how to do the right workouts at the right time. Your water intake combined with the right salt intake, the amount of carbs you're putting in, those are kind of the pillars right now that I heard you say have taken you from an already amazing performance 3 years ago into something that completely dominated the field. And I think you need to take into account that weather too, because that weather definitely slowed you and everybody down. And the fact that you were able to just like kind of keep it all together, really gritty race, and congratulations on that. That's just amazing. And just to put a little plug out there for Tracer, this is going to sound like an infomercial, but it's really not. The reason we created Tracer is exactly this reason. Like Jesse's saying, how much Jesse has talent that most people listening, including myself, do not have. Okay. Like you have genetic talent, Jesse, that is going to get you a long way, even if you mess everything up, or you're still going to probably beat most of us, even when you do it wrong. But Jesse learned how to apply his training correctly. And that's what Tracer is all about, because it's unique and it has to change on the fly. You can't just get a calendar out and say, here's my calendar. I'm just going to go through every workout and not worry about how I feel. I mean, we started this conversation and you said you need to take a week of rest sometime. You need to throw in these days where maybe you were planning on doing that beat down workout. You got out there 15 minutes in and turned around and came home. And actually that was the best thing you could have done. Right. And so it's dynamic and it has to change. And that's why I'm kind of plugging Tracer, because that's what the whole thing is designed to do. Now, if you can afford a coach like Jesse, go hire him. If Jesse's got availability for you and you've got the money to pay him, he's over at Evoke with Scott Johnston, and they are doing awesome. They're dominating this year. Okay. So they know what they're talking about. And so if that works for you, then go do it. Where Tracer comes in is making it a little more accessible to those who maybe don't have the money or can't find the coaches that they want. So that's kind of my plug here at the end of this conversation for Tracer. Check it out at tracerfitness.com. And Jesse, there's so many more things I could ask you. I'm going to maybe one more question here and then we'll wrap this up. But what do you think? Two-part question as well. So maybe it's two, I'm cheating here, but what do you think right now the industry is saying that you're not sold on? Like something counterintuitive or something where you want a BS check on something. Like the industry is pushing something and you're like, I'm not sure I'm ready to go there. That's part one of well, let's start with that. And then I'll give you part two of the question.
Yeah, I'm still not on sodium bicarbonate yet. I'm still very reluctant to accept that as an endurance enhancer, and even I feel like exogenous ketones have definitely lost a little steam recently. But I'm also just like, man, people are spending so much on nutrition already. Do we really need these super expensive supplements that still have yet to show real promise? I mean, the ketone esters I get for mental health, mental clarity late in a race, that I can totally understand. But it's not. I just don't think it's going to make you faster. And sodium bicarbonate, sure, if you're 400-meter runner, absolutely, But for 100 miles, like, no, come on. Like, maybe I'm gonna eat crow here in a couple of years, but for now, just like save your money, Especially if you're not someone who's like really trying to get every second out of yourself. Save your money. Like, don't buy ketones or sodium bicarbonate. That's just my take on those things right there. Yeah.
Yeah. I just had a flashback to when Killian first used the sodium bicarb in the bowl, and it looks like a bowl of like cereal, right? And he was at, whatever aid station and halfway through UTMB slurping this cereal really fast. And everybody was like, what's he doing with that cereal? It was the bicarb. And Jesse's calling BS on it. I love it. Okay, so sodium bicarb and ketones, iffy. The second part of the question is, what's a BS check on yourself where you thought something was either right or wrong, and now you've completely 180'd on it?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. I mean, creatine is definitely making a lot of momentum in endurance, and there wasn't a lot of evidence at the beginning, like even a year ago. But there's more and more that it can help endurance, and then it's just like good for overall brain health, especially in women. So I think that creatine is safe, and I don't think it probably doesn't hurt to try if you're an aging athlete. So that's changed. I never like bashed it like I kind of am with ketones and bicarb, but I basically would say you don't need to take it if you're an endurance athlete. If you're a strength-based athlete, plenty of evidence there. Sure, take it. But in terms of endurance, like there just wasn't a lot, and now it's starting to look like there are some, and I've heard a lot of antidotes for what those are worth that people are seeing effects there. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I'm sure there's going to be some coming up in the future, but I do try to really kind of like anything that I do say, I really try to like back it up with some scientific research. Like that is something I try to take pride in, is like, things change over time, but when I do say it, I have done a decent amount of research, and I'm not just like saying something. That's something I really want to stick to. That's like a big policy of mine, is I'm not going to just go off of just go off of whim. I'm gonna see if there's actually scientific basis for me saying something, because people are listening, and I want to like not mislead anyone. So that's a big thing of mine. So things do change, and I am willing to admit that creatine might be making its way into endurance sports, and maybe I even start recommending it. We'll see in the next little bit.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And I'm going to answer my own question on that. And that is, I'm calling BS on sodium citrate.
There it is. We knew that was coming.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I already said, and I'm putting it out there now. And yeah, I want to do some more research with you on this subject, and maybe, we should really get our ducks in a row here, and then publish something. And we might be wrong too, right? Like, that's the beauty in this. Even when you do your research, it's such a complicated topic, that, of course, with more understanding, what we thought was one thing, suddenly it flips, right? And that's the beauty of the sport. It's happening all the time. And that's the fun too. We get to go experiment and see what works and what doesn't. Jesse, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. Everybody who's listening, you can get Jesse through his website, nutritionrundown.com. Did I get that right, Jesse? Nutritionrundown.com is Jesse's website. We'll also put in the description of the podcast, or in the YouTube video, or on the link that we'll have on tracerfitness.com. We'll make sure that you can get a hold of Jesse directly if you want. If you need help understanding what we said in this podcast, we throw around terms like zone 2, like everybody knows what that even is. And sometimes zone 2 means the different thing to different people, depending on what they're saying. So if you're confused at all, just write us, info@tracerfitness.com. We'll make sure we give you an answer. Hit us up if you need help figuring out your aerobic, how to train aerobically. We can help you with that. We have our app that has a subscription and a price. But if you're listening to this and just want some help, there's other ways we can help you. We can answer your questions. We can point you to podcasts and materials that we've already created. So hit us up. Let us know how we can help you smash your goals, how we can help you get faster, how we can connect you with people like Jesse. And maybe in the future you'll see a Jesse Rich Tracer program as well. So I'll keep hounding him for that, and we'll see where this all goes. But Jesse, awesome conversation. Huge congratulations to an amazing race. So fun to watch you. Way to represent Salt Lake City. And thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Joey. And if you guys happen to be coming out to DC Peaks, I'll be hanging out at the finish there. So hope to meet some of you.
Awesome. Yeah. Come find Jesse at the finish line at DC Peaks. I'll be there as well. Thanks, Jesse.
Heck yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Joey.
Take care.